You know, I think it's very possible that Gibson could have been just as famous for amps as Fender is. Gibson made some really interesting and cool amps back in the day, and I've got a couple of them here. Today we're talking about this Gibson Falcon. Now this is quite a small combo amp. I think it's somewhere around 14 watts. It's incredibly quiet, and that might be something to do with the design of it, or the transformers, or something with my one, but it's not something I'm going to change. I want to dive into like the history of these amps, what it sounds like, and what it sounds like with a few different guitars. So let's take a look at it first. So I'm going to say this is like a medium-sized combo amp. Look, that's a 4x10 Bassman, that's a 2x12 amp there. This is somewhere smaller than those, like a deluxe, bit taller than a deluxe. It's quite light as well, so I don't know what the cabinet's made of. Something light, possibly cheap too. That seems to be the way with Gibson, and I don't mind it at all. Certainly the whatever was labelled on the front here was done in a way that could come off pretty easily. But I absolutely love the way this looks. I love these knobs with these funky sort of red arrows on them. Yeah, it's all like a cool design, but seems like made in someone's shed. Love the handle as well. So what do we have here? So there's two inputs. They sound the same to me and the volume's the same, so I'm not sure whether it was for two instruments or what. And then this is like a line out, which is to do with being able to use the reverb for another amp. I haven't actually figured out how to use that yet, but I'm going to try. Then we've got volume, tone, reverb, and then the tremolo, the two tremolo sort of knobs there. And I think this is an early one. I think this grill cloth says it's early and a bit rarer than later ones. So the history goes that in '61 they came out with a tweed version of this, slightly different circuit as well, and about 200 of those were made. Those are pretty rare and a bit more expensive. This one cost £800, which I think for a cool vintage amp that really works, and with a new speaker, it's got a warehouse speaker in. I think that's pretty good. Then this early iteration of the next model is also considered really good, and then as the decade wore on, I think they even became solid state and all sort. By the end of the decade, the Falcon was not an amp that was really of any interest to us, and apparently a bit sterile, didn't really break up, and was just a sort of clean thing. This, on the other hand, is quite the opposite. It's basically broken up from the beginning, and it's really quiet. It doesn't go above 90 to 91 decibels at the most. And if I kick in something like the Jan Ray by Vemuram with the volume set 3/4, which would be ridiculously loud on any other amp, it takes it to about 92. So it really doesn't have a lot of capacity for volume. What it does do is, in my opinion, sound perfect with the sort of swampy and delta blues that I want to play. Let's hear a Telecaster. So earlier this year, I'd become interested in amp building. I built a few amps, and I don't think it's something I'm going to do, you know, professionally. There's a lot of regulations and things involved. But at the time, I was talking to all my mates and saying that I'd love to make an amp that had a button on it that basically just said like more swampy, where the sag there'd be more sag, where there'd be the top end rolled off, where there'd be a bit more mids, it'd be very creamy sounding. And basically, I don't need to do that anymore because this amp, it is just the more swampy button that I had in my head. It's got this washy reverb, this very cool tremolo. I think it's my favorite tremolo. And it just does the sound that I was actually looking for. I wish it did it 3 or 4 decibels louder, maybe even 5 decibels louder, then it'd be much more usable in a small live situation if I was going to use it for that. As it stands, you could mic it up. Actually, it could be perfect. I just think Gibson should be making amps. It's sad that they don't. Now I need to try some humbuckers in here. I've had this amp a week. I've not actually plugged the humbucker in. So let's give it a go. Look, I like a big headroom clean, a Fender clean amp as much as the next guy, but that amp produces the sound that I want when I'm trying to put pedals in front of a normal amp without a pedal. So yeah, it's got some downsides. It's probably not going to last forever given the condition it's in. It's not very loud, and I can't actually see what the controls do, but I can tell you what, for 800 quid, I would take that over anything else at that price range, that's for sure. And I'm going to be keeping an eye out for probably an earlier version of this, the Tweed version. This is a 64, and I think you can get a 61 with a slightly different circuit that's supposed to be really, really cool. So I'll be looking for that. But it does sort of bring up a bigger question for me. You know, I've been getting these high headroom amps like the 2-Rock, even the Bassmans. The Magnatone, even though it's got this sort of vintage vibe, it's pretty high headroom. Yeah, that's the sort of thing we all talk about these days. Oh, how much headroom has it got? And I guess because you want to build up maybe a big sound using pedals. But actually, you know, it's over the last year or so, I've definitely come to that realization that I don't need all of that often. Because often when I get, you know, the 2-Rock and I put a fuzz pedal in front of it, I'm trying to recreate the sound I've basically heard here. So I think I'm going to be trying to find a slightly louder amp that can also do this. So I'll be looking down the Gibson path. I also would try and pair this with another amp. The only problem is the other amp's going to have to be played pretty quietly. So I'm not sure how it will work exactly. But yeah, I knew as soon as I played this that it was something I had to have for recording. It just does something effortlessly that I try and get out of everything else all the time. So yeah, with a Telecaster, with that P90, with these T-top humbuckers, absolutely awesome. And I don't know about you, but I just actually love the way it looks, how beaten up it is. Like a properly new looking one looks like this. Cool. At least I could understand what the knobs do by looking at that picture, but I love the way this is absolutely rusted away. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one. There's some other vintage amps coming up in the next couple of videos. There's this Gibson Rhythm King down here. There's a 1960 Bassman down here. They don't belong to me, they're borrowed from Sweet Amps, which I made a video about last week. So yeah, if you look forward to that, then subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.